Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Radio Inc. What's 2014 look like? Well, according to our forecast conference, people are predicting about 1, maybe 2% growth for radio. But the real question in my mind is, what does our future look like? How is radio going to compete in the digital world? A lot of people in our industry are defending radio, talking about why radio continues to be strong, why the digital world will not impact the radio world. And quite frankly, I don't see that you have any other choice. But we have to admit, it looks a little defensive. So what is it that we can do to not appear defensive? Well, I think the first thing is to admit that a digital world is going to change radio. It may not have changed it completely now. It may have eroded a small percentage of our audiences, and maybe that listening is coming from somewhere else. But how is it going to change radio? As someone who runs a radio station or operates within radio, I think it's important to understand what this all looks like in the future. It seems like everybody in Silicon Valley wants to be in the radio business. They look at our revenues, they look at our relationships with listeners, and they want to take that away from us. Look at Apple, the largest corporation in the world. They're doing Apple Radio. They're already growing at rapid rates. I think they're probably more of a competitor for Pandora, and I think Pandora is the one who probably ought to be sweating bullets over Apple, although Pandora listening seems to be maintaining at the present time. The question is Pandora really a competitor to radio, or is it a music service? I think the decision about that has a lot to do with you and the response that you have at your radio station. I oftentimes think those of us in radio have a tendency to drive our audiences to services like Pandora. Think about the user experience. Think about the ability to create your own radio station, your own playlist based on what you like, and the ability to listen in an environment that, according to Pandora, will never have more than 3 minutes of commercials ever. Look at what happened back in the 1970s. All radio listening was taking place on AM. Then there were some young rebels who put this music radio on FM, alternative radio, underground radio, and then eventually top 40 radio. The listenership started migrating. But when we were on the radio back then, we were talking about fewer. We were running 2, 3, 4 minutes of spots compared to AM's heavy spot loads, which at the time were probably about 12 minutes. Suddenly, FM radio took over AM radio. Took a few years, but eventually it happened. I think a lot of that was because of commercial loads. Now you think about what's happening today with Pandora. Pandora claims to have 10% of all radio listening. Now we know statistics say that 10% of all radio listening is the entire amount of streaming, including Pandora, including everybody else, including the streams that you're doing. But what we're doing possibly is handing our audience permission to move over to another music service. Why? Because we're loading them with a lot of spot load. Is there a way you can look at this and say, can I make this a more user-friendly environment? If I'm running a music radio station, what's the advantage that I can offer that Pandora can't offer? I think those are the things you have to look at. Can you lower your spot load? Can you increase reliance on the community, the personalities, the localism, so that you are so deeply ingrained into that community that people want to listen to you so they know what's going on? I think we're moving into a new age. The new age is what I would call the age of context. We've been in the age of convergence, and that's where all things become all things. As a matter of fact, we have a conference about that. So in the radio business, you're no longer just in the radio business, you're really in the media business, right? Because you're publishing online, you're publishing stories on your website, you're doing videos, you're doing social networking. You have to be everywhere today, and that's all mediums converging. Well, now we're moving into this age of context. In the age of context, it's all about big data and sensors. Big data means all the data that's coming from all the places that you're giving input. Your mobile phone data, your computer data, your purchase data, everything you buy, everything you touch is all tied into that data. And that will help retailers and others have predictive models. So here's what this looks like. All this data is coming at you. All this data is coming through you. We are able now, through big data, to read everything about you. We know your patterns. We know when you leave for work, when you get home from work, when you go to lunch, where you go to lunch, what you spend your money on, what else you're spending your money on. We know everything about you. Your cell phone can track everything about your movements, when you're going. Your cell phone can actually know, based on a predictive pattern, when you're going to get into your car. A connected car, for instance, would be able to know, oh, it's about noon. He's going to get into the car exactly 10 minutes till noon. It's 30 degrees out. Let's start the car, get the heater going. That's what predictive data is all about. Now, in this age of context, it's all about sensors. The iPhone has 5 different sensors in it. It senses all kinds of data. There's all kinds of sensors based on the computer technology that's out there in your environment. Ultimately, this all ties together. So you'll be able to walk into the mall and you'll walk into a store. They will instantly know, the person greeting you will instantly know if you've been to the store before. They'll know your name. They know how much you spent the last time. They'll know if you're a new customer. They'll even know if you have a police record or if you've ever been a shoplifter. That changes everything in the retail marketplace. And of course, the retail marketplace are your advertisers, right? Well, radio, in 2014, you're not going to see much of the world of context in your industry. But you need to watch it because it's going to impact the retail business. It's going to impact how people are buying media. They're going to be watching for things that have predictive models. I've been saying for a long time that radio needs to embrace digital. Digital meaning that we have the ability to track all listening and to interact with the listener. That's going to change everything. Yet we're fighting it. We're fighting it. Why? Because we want to hang on to what we've got. Our business is flat. Is that what you want? 1% to 2% growth? Why don't we go for something bigger? If we were all digital as an industry, we would have the ability to be living in the age of context and be competitive with all the other products out there that are being offered by other media companies. Imagine this. You're driving down the road. It's lunchtime. Your system in your car recognizes where you are, and a commercial comes on your radio station and it says, hey, by the way, we know you were in Whole Foods last week for lunch, and we know you had that terrific pasta special. They're just around the corner. They've got a special pasta thing going on right now. And by the way, we've got a 10% off coupon for you today. Just say these words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever the code is. Suddenly, your radio becomes contextual. Suddenly, your radio says, hey, by the way, you were down this way last week. Did you remember to pick up your dry cleaning? It sounds crazy. I know, it's way out there. But this is what predictive technology does in the age of context. That's why I believe radio ultimately needs to move to all digital. I'm not running a radio station today, so it's easy for me to say, but I am running a publishing business, and I know in my business we have to live in the age of context. We have to live in this digital era. That means we have to be doing everything possible. We need to touch every point that our consumers are touching and be there in the way they want us to be. We have to be mobile ready because 50% of all viewing of websites is on mobile. That's only going to grow. We have to be there where they are. You have to be where they are too. So what can you do about it? Well, I think the first thing is don't put your head in the sand. We have a tendency to be focused on running our radio stations and making sure we're hitting our budgets, and I know you have to do that. And I know it's a lot easier to say, you know, whatever happens is going to happen, and I'll be there and I'll be ready when it happens. But in the meantime, I'm not investing in that. I'm not spending my time in that. Well, that may be true, but you may find that our audiences migrate away because we're not offering them what they want. We have to make sure that we are as solid as our competitors. Our competitors aren't radio stations anymore. Our competitors aren't Pandora. Our competitors are everything in the media business that is interacting with consumers. So here's what I think you should do. Number one, study digital. Take time, learn everything you can about this digital world. Read about the age of context, read about sensors, understand how the media business is changing. Number two, talk to your advertisers. Find out what your advertisers really want. Find out where they're spending their time and their money There's a lot of digital things that radio stations aren't even aware of that advertisers are spending money on. We talked to a car dealer at our Dash conference. He was so sick of getting so many different sales reps, he finally threw up his hands and said, you know what, I don't know anybody in radio in my town anymore, and he just stopped advertising because he said he'd been through 30 or 40 reps. So guess what he's advertising on now? Pandora. It's a reality. He says he likes it. He says it works no matter what we say about, oh yeah, but we have this and we have that, we have live, we have local, we have community, we have DJs, we have, you know, the bottom line is if it's working for him, he's going to stick with it. You need to understand what your advertisers are doing. Go out and ask the questions. Number 3, study your audiences. Where is your audience consuming radio and audio? What are they doing? What else are they doing? What are they listening on? What devices? What are they trying that they haven't tried before? What's happening in their car environment? The car environment has changed everything. Now, the connected car, 2015 is the first year almost all cars will be connected. And it will take many years because there's only 14 to 16 million cars sold a year. So it's going to take many years before all the cars are connected. But most cars are connected today because of what? The mobile device, right? The smartphone. And many of these car companies are connecting the smartphone in the car. So keep in mind that people are connecting through mobile, and this is the new world of listening. You need to find out what your audience is doing. Really study them and make sure that you're where they need you to be. You need to connect wherever they are socially. You need to connect whatever devices they're on, what they're listening to. And it changes very rapidly, as you know. Number 4, protect your brand. Everything should be about reinforcing your brand. This is not the time to be timid. You have Apple, you have Pandora, you have Spotify, you know, Slacker, many services coming after you, trying to take your radio listening away. You need to promote your brand. You need to make sure that you have a tight connection with your listener, that they will look for you, that they will seek you out, that you are so important to them that no matter what happens, what environment, they will seek you out because they have hundreds of thousands of other choices now in all forms of audio. Number 5, surround yourself with digital thinkers. Look for people on your staff who are really into this stuff. Find some 20-year-olds. Kids know this technology better than you and I ever will. Find some young people who really understand what's happening, what kids are into, what services they're using. You know, there's a saying that kids go away from everything their parents find. In other words, kids are not on Facebook now. Why? Because their parents are there. Kids are already starting to abandon Instagram because parents are finding about Instagram and moving there. So they're moving to other services. Find out what the kids are into and get them to help you get your radio station tuned in and in these places and having a strategy to be in all these places. I know it's costly, I know it's impossible to do everything, but make sure you're going where your audience wants you to be. And 6, most importantly, understand that you're not in the radio business anymore. Right? You're not in the radio business, you're in the media business. And when you're in the media business, you have to produce media, all kinds of media. And that's the name of the game these days in the internet era. Now 2014 is the beginning, watch those words, the beginning of the age of context. Start watching for things that are being predicted. When you go out and you use retail, when you go out and use your phone, when you're on your computer, start paying attention to how people are predicting things for you. You'll start noticing it now that it's been mentioned. And start realizing that this can happen for radio. Thanks for listening.